Well, of course, it's going to be a busy time for political parties as they announce their promises ahead of the local government election set for the 1st of November. The National Homeless Network has launched a National Homeless Manifesto focused specifically on the problems that affect people living on the streets. The movement says the current municipal leadership is violating their constitutional rights. I'm joined now by Raymond Perrier, who is the National Homeless Network's convener. Mr. Perrier, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View on ENCA. Well, we sort of got a broad understanding of the challenges faced by homeless people in various municipalities and metros across the country. New municipalities and councils will be in place after the 1st of November's elections. What would you want them to focus on in terms of the rights of the homeless?
Good afternoon. We're really clear as the National Homeless Network that there are 5 areas we want municipalities to focus on: shelters, healthcare, sanitation, security, and employment. Those are the 5 areas that most affect the lives of homeless people, and they're all areas in which municipalities can take action to make things better, or can stop doing some of the bad things they do that which would also make things better.
Now,
For
how
each
would
of
they,
the municipalities,
how would they be focusing on that to make this practical? What would need to change?
Well, what needs to change varies from city to city. So though this is a national homeless manifesto, its application is metro by metro. So what's needed in Cape Town isn't what's needed in Tshwane, isn't what's needed here in eThekwini, which is where I am. So under each of those 5 headings, the organizations on the ground have worked with homeless people to define specifically what is needed. So for example, in Durban, we have some fantastic emergency shelters that were set up during the COVID lockdown. And we're saying under shelters, what we need is a commitment from the municipality to continue to fund those. In Cape Town, there have been big problems of security and finding homeless people for breaking laws. The reason that happens is because the bylaws don't make any sense. So in Cape Town, one of the demands under security is that the city look again at its bylaws and redefine them in a way which is fair on the homeless. So city by city, we have defined specific targets for each of the cities under those 5 headings.
Yeah, just to be clear, you are not asking for special treatment. You are asking for access, for example, to healthcare that is constitutionally guaranteed to any citizen in the country.
Absolutely. And indeed, for example, the city of Tshwane recognized a few years ago that homeless people in the city were not able to access healthcare as easily as regular citizens. So they committed to setting up a street medicine unit. 2 years on, it still hasn't happened. So our demand to the city of Tshwane is live up to the promise you made and deliver on what you've said you're going to do.
Now, the safety on the streets is a tricky one for anybody. And if you're homeless, you're so vulnerable and exposed. That message of safety on the streets, how would you, for example, in your manifesto, do you clarify how you'd expect, for example, the city, the municipality or the metro to collaborate with law enforcement agencies?
Well, the first thing we want the cities to do is stop wasting money, beating up homeless people, stealing their belongings and kidnapping them, which sadly is still the strategy that many cities use. When they don't know what to do, they try to clear away the problem. Of course, it doesn't actually solve the problem, and people just come back without their belongings, without their IDs, and even more marginalized than they were before. So that, strangely, is a way in which municipalities can save money if they have better strategies in place to keep the streets safe for homeless people and for everyone else. Homeless people have a right to safety no less than others.
Children on the streets, your manifesto, does it touch on that?
Well, children on the streets are a very specific issue. Children should not be on the streets. Very often the children we see begging on the streets are not actually homeless. They've been sent out to beg, but they're not homeless. When they are homeless, when they are on their own, there are specific agencies, specifically the Department of Social Development, that must intervene and generally does intervene to rescue those young people.
Yeah, now, welfare-wise, I'm thinking here about the grant system that is supporting millions of South Africans who need it the most. The homeless, you've just mentioned identity documents. Many of them don't have their IDs, either they've been stolen or what. That social welfare net sometimes misses them. How are you addressing it in your manifesto for the homeless?
It's one of the biggest problems that homeless people have. They lose their IDs, often stolen by the police, and then they can't access any of the other services which should be available to them. We estimate that fewer than 20% of the homeless here in Durban have been able to access the emergency COVID grant, even though they would obviously be entitled to. We're struggling to get homeless people vaccinated against COVID, again, because they need IDs. So we're working on the ground with the Department of Home Affairs, we're working with the Department of Health to make sure that people do get access to vaccines. But the problem wouldn't happen if people didn't lose their IDs in the first place, if they weren't stolen in the first place.
Yeah. If there were a couple of messages as we're heading towards the end of our interview, Raymond, that you'd like to highlight, political parties, those who are coming in, if you on behalf of the homeless, that you don't want them to miss, or that could really be a focal point for shifting the handle in terms of the plight of the homeless, what would that be?
What's good for the homeless is good for the city overall. Providing safe sleeping places for homeless people is good for them, but it's good for the rest of us because we're not scared walking on the streets at night. There might be homeless people sleeping in doorways. Providing healthcare to homeless is good for the homeless, but it's good for all of us. We've discovered during COVID that the health of any one of us is dependent on the wider community. So most of the initiatives we're proposing are ones which not only benefit the homeless, but benefit the wider citizenry. And that's why we want people to back this and say, we care about the homeless because they're our fellow citizens and they deserve the same rights as the rest of us.
Thank you very much, sir. That's Raymond Perrier from the National Homeless Network, just shedding more light on the plight of homeless and how they want political parties and those who are coming into the new councils after the 1st of November's local government elections to improve things.